All right, welcome to Johnny's Garage. You can see my normal partner in crime tonight is not here, but I have somebody just as good, if not better. I have a young lady who is a seamstress to the stars. I know at least 1/3 to probably 1/2 of the people in this group are wearing her clothing. She has been in the business almost 50 years. She's been to different countries. She's got family in the business still. She's still making outfits. And did I forget one of the best things? She is the wife to the late, great Ken Timbs. And I think 90% of the people in this group know who Ken Timbs is. Please welcome Miss Juanita Timbs.
Thank you.
Did I forget anything?
A lot.
I don't have that much time and paper to write all the things you've done. The first time I met you, I don't know who gave me the number. Somebody said, well, you know, there's a lady named Juanita that makes outfits, because I had called Adrian Street because he made my first 2 outfits. And he got on the phone and says, I'm sorry, I'm in the garden. I ain't got time. Call back. So that was the last time I ever called Mr. Adrian Street. And I don't know if you could see the outfit right up there. That's the first outfit you ever made me. Lord. And on this side is the mask. And I could still put them on today and do a match. They are still in that good a shape.
What year was that?
1996. That was almost 30 years ago.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So now you're 36 years old, right?
Yes, 36 years old.
See, I can do math.
And add quite a few. And when I made the phone call to you and I says, look, I have a show this weekend, and I told you what Adrian said to me. And I said, is there any way you can help me? She goes, can you pick them up by Friday? And from then on, you know, I've probably had 30 masks. Well, I'm not including the little gimmick sales masks, because then I would have to say thousands.
Right.
But actual working masks and outfits, I probably had about 30 masks and a few outfits made by you. And most of them have stood the test of time. Some of them I've sold off, you know, in like auctions, things like that. And I have a whole box full of stuff out there that I've collected. But I know you make outfits for like Terry Lawler, the rocker. Everybody knows him, and some of the old guys. And I know you make a lot of outfits for the new guys.
Yes. Who
are some of the big names? Just we're gonna let you name names here.
Oh, okay.
You deserve that credit. Who are some of the big names you've made outfits for?
Harlem Heat, Booker T and Stevie Ray, Sister Sherry. I made all their outfits when they were with WCW. Big Van Vader. Wow. Now we're going to start naming names. That's going to tell our age. Kevin Sullivan. There's pay-per-views that WCW had, that everything that was in the pay-per-views I made. Man, they'll all come to mind in 3 o'clock in the morning. I remember what all I did. I mean, I keep a list. If somebody asks me, I can shoot pictures. I made Jody Hamilton's The Assassin's Mask. Everything that Ted Allen wore ever since I met him in the early 80s. I made all his stuff, Nightmare Ted Allen. Man, Mick Foley, all the Cactus Jack stuff that Mick Foley wore, I made that. Terry Taylor. I mean, I started naming them. Everything that Goldberg wore when he was with WCW, I would make his trunks. And they would call me and they said, we got to have him for the show, because when he came out, the sparklers would hit his trunks and melt them. So he would have to have new ones every show. That I don't know why they didn't burn it off, but so at that time they had Delta Dash, and I could make the trunks go to the Delta, and they would have it there at that show that night at their arena. We don't have that kind of service anymore. Post
Well,
office never gets it anywhere anymore. So
if most people can't tell by now that you've made it for the big people, then they've never watched wrestling because some of those ones you just named are still in the business today or still talked about today.
yes,
And you've worked with probably, is there an organization you haven't worked with, you or Ken?
um, I'm not. Back in the day, it was all of them. I ship stuff around the world. I still do now. So
Well, I'm going to ask, how can people get in touch with you? I'm going to do this right at the beginning because I want people to be able to get in touch with you.
the best way to contact me is through Facebook with my name, and go into Messenger, and I'll answer you as soon as I see it.
All right. And just to anybody who wants to get an outfit made, you're going to pay money because she doesn't work cheap. But like I say, that outfit right behind me is 30 years old and it's still ring able right now. I've never had a problem with anything. And I've always told you that here's what I want, make me look good.
Yeah, if people will let me work and design it and quit sending me these little cartoon drawings, because that's 2D and it doesn't always transfer to 3D, and then they want to argue. But I know you can draw pretty pictures with computers. I'm computer literate some days, but it doesn't always translate because I still make all the outfits the old school wrestling way. I don't use heat press. I don't print on it. Everything is hand drawn, hand cut, and sewn on, and that's one reason why it lasts so long.
Well, I know when I used to go up to the house and I used to sit and talk to Ken while you were in the back making adjustments or something. Buck was around, your son, and a few of the others would always be around. It looked like a clothing factory blew up in your house. Every room you went into, there was materials, sewing machines. It
It still looks the same. I have sewing on all three levels of my house, but I have a daughter that does wigs for drag. So now, and she performs drag, and so her stuff is from where mine's not sitting, hers is. So you need a wig, she'll make you a beautiful wig.
well, didn't some of your sons make clothes too?
They
Out
did. Almost every one of them can work with me. Mostly what they learned to do was cut out, trim threads. Joseph could sew. He doesn't now. Roderick makes leather masks. He makes cane masks and other leather masks. You have to look him up on Facebook, but it's Roderick Timbs.
okay. And we're going around to everybody, but you have a quite a few sons and I know one daughter that's in the wrestling type business. Um, are they still wrestling and doing their? I know your daughter's still doing her MMA,
Yes.
and
And
how many of the sons are still wrestling?
Buck Russell's part time, and so does Wolfgang. Joseph occasionally referees, but Buck officiates Olympic style wrestling, and they fly him around the world to officiate. And my youngest son, Alejandro, is now officiating amateur wrestling.
And when I actually talked to you about coming on here, you were just at a meet with them, so
Yes.
I wish them all the luck because that's a hard thing to do is be a ref these days.
Yeah, this people are angry, so they show it.
They do. Well, let's get to the elephant in the room. I know some people want to hear some Ken Tim stories along with your stories because your family is just got so many stories because of the abilities they've been able to perform because of you and Ken. Uh, if people don't know who Ken Timms is, can you tell me who Ken Timms was?
Ken Tim's Fabuloso Blondie in Mexico, and in Southwest Championship Wrestling. He was the gentleman Ken Tim's in Alabama, in Kansas City, and he started off in Georgia and in Mid Atlantic as Ken Timbs. He's always used his real name. He was a police officer at the time they hired him to be a wrestler. And that gave them the opportunity to have police security that they needed because it's deputized statewide in Georgia, plus an additional hand. So that's really how he got to start.
So what you're saying is wrestling organizations are cheap and find any way they can to get out of paying money.
And that was in the 70s, okay?
But he's also wrestled under a lot of things. He's did the Assassin.
He did. The first time he did the Assassin, they flew him in from Georgia Championship Wrestling, the TV show. They flew him from there down to Florida to do just one match because Jody couldn't be there. And what they did was broke his leg and shipped him back out. And he had to sit at the airport until his flight came back out. So that was the first time he actually wrestled as the Assassin. And then as he got older, there was Music City Wrestling used him as the Assassin. A lot of independents have used him as the Assassin. And he also wrestled underneath the mask in Alabama, in Continental as Mr. Class.
I didn't know that one.
Yeah.
I'll have to look at those videos.
Look it up. He broke Roy Lee Welch's leg. He held the belt for a month and then he lost it.
I've been trying to find a lot of his stuff because he's one of the few that's been around everywhere. And sometimes he didn't stay long. Sometimes he stayed and made an impact. But those tapes are getting harder and harder to find because everybody threw them away.
Yeah. A lot of mine after I moved here, my basement area flooded and all the tapes got wet and molded and they weren't salvageable. So I lost a lot of that. Some of it showing up, like you found a lot of footage. If you go into the some of the Hispanic people, they'll send me footage every so often from Mexico. But like in they did it in most of the old territories. Geigel's really bad about it. They just filmed over the top of the tape. So the TV studios, the amount of money it cost for those tapes, they just didn't keep them. So you had to find somebody that recorded it on a VCR and then transfer it over now.
Right. They kept them just long enough to get the TV show and then erased them.
Right.
And that's a shame because I'm really having a lot of trouble, like with Ken trying to find stuff. We got a lot of older people. When did you get involved with the business? Was it before Ken or with Ken or?
With Ken.
Okay, and you had told me 1978.
1978. Yeah. He was trained. He originally was trained by Jack Ford and Marvin Turner, who were on TV for what was that? Georgia Championship Wrestling at that time. Turner Broadcasting, and then Bob Sweetan. He worked as security at a show that Bob Sweetan was at, and Bob Sweetan in exchange asked him what he wanted because Ken saved him from getting his fanny stomped by the crowd. So he asked what he wanted. He said he wanted to wrestle. So Bob Sweetan took him under his wing and then took him to Bobby Simmons. And that's when they decided they could work with him. Ole Anderson took an interest in him, and Ole and Gene actually trained him.
And that's really weird because Ole doesn't like anybody.
Ole fired him the first time. He brought him in from, you laugh. He worked Georgia 4 weeks. His first paycheck was really pitiful because it was only $975. That's when he decided maybe he didn't want to be a police officer anymore because that was like not near that much money, like 125 weeks what he was bringing home. So he quit and became a wrestler. And he worked 4 weeks in Georgia, and Ole took him up for about 4 more weeks in Mid-Atlantic and brought him into the office and said, "You're the drizzling shits." And if we're not supposed to say bad words, okay, I said it. And he sent him home.
You can say anything you want on here. When it goes online, nice. It's put as not kid friendly, and
Most days I'm not. But then so he came home, but he really wanted to wrestle. So what he did, him and Mike Davis would go to the YMCA, and in a boxing ring, they would work out together. And then Ken would go down to the Georgia office and he would talk to whoever was in the office. He'd sit there and they would go through tapes and stuff. And he showed up every TV. And it was 9 months before he was hired back. But Ole actually hired him back 9 months later because he had improved enough. When he first started, he watched Wahoo McDaniels and said, I can be like him. Well, remember that Wahoo McDaniels was Native American. Ken was not, okay? But he didn't think this one through. And Ron West, the referee Ron West, actually had Chattanooga at that time. He went up to Chattanooga to wrestle. I was sitting there, and it was in a theater with the balcony seating. I was sitting at the top looking, and they had the stage was on the ring was on the stage on the platform, and with the curtains pulled, so you couldn't really see the wrestlers on either side come out. And he was wrestling Mike Davis. They wrestled each other a lot in these different territories. Mike was babyface, Kim was heel. And Kim was making this big comeback. And all of a sudden you look and he started doing the Indian war dance. And he all that. And you hear Ron West, and there's a big crowd. All of a sudden you hear this person scream, "You ain't no damn Indian." And a hot dog goes flying across the ring. And then you look, and here comes a Coke flying across the ring, and Ron West still screaming behind the curtain, and then I don't even know how the match ended at that point in time, but that was when he learned that just because it worked for Wahoo, he shouldn't try it himself. That was a really great learning lesson in front of everybody, but it was funny. And
he learned what heat was the hard way.
He did. The wrong kind. Okay. He exactly knew what the wrong kind was.
Well, I know you talk about Ken having problems getting in. I know that every time I went up to get an outfit or anything like that, Ken was always willing to help, show you something, things like that. Was that just his nature all the time to be helpful?
That was really him. That was his personality. He worked it was so hard for him to get in. He worked so hard. And then a lot of things he learned, he had to learn the hard way, like make mistakes, really bad mistakes. And, get yelled at, get called into the office and things like that. And you didn't want to see the younger guys make mistakes that he made, and he could help make the wrestling business a better business by helping because at that time, a lot of the old guys wouldn't help. They wouldn't. That was tough. You fight your way in, you fight your way through. We had to. You do the same thing. But Ken didn't have that same personality. He also didn't have that same thought process. He didn't have that when he was a police officer. I watched him more than once walk up to a crowd of teenagers standing on the side of the street. These people start trouble. He'd walk up to them and talk to them and ask them to do something. You look, they just dispersed and started doing whatever he asked. It was in his nature and his personality. But it made the wrestling business better by doing that.
Well, I know you had told me before, because we've talked a lot about things, and you had said he didn't get along with certain people because of their lifestyle choices, because he was actually a good guy and didn't do a lot of the stuff they did.
He was a family person. It was family first, God first. We didn't do drugs. We didn't have drugs around. He didn't want it around the children. They didn't need that lifestyle, even though it was a lifestyle of many, many wrestlers, and he was around it a lot. It didn't come home. He did not bring them home. Don't bring it to the house. Don't bring it near us. If you do, then you're not, you'll be asked to leave politely the first time. The second time, he'll help you leave. So, and he really was a good family man.
Yeah, I know whenever I had talked to him, he never acted that way about anything. He was always quite, what's the words, respectful, and he wasn't braggadocious. Now he'd mess with you and things like that, kind of like you do. You have your moments where you play and stuff, but
he was good at playing
a mean way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. Well, it was funny. Ribs were funny. Doing things to people's funny. If they weren't harmed in any way, he taught one guy into writing a letter and taking it to taking it to Steve Lawler. And in the letter, he told Steve Lawler that if he would let him wrestle, that he would honor him because he knew Steve was from the golden era of wrestling. Now Steve was not from the golden era of wrestling, and he and I mean, it just went on and on, talked about how great, because we have to write that letter, how great Steve was, and we talked to him, and not only that, buying an outfit and wearing his outfit into a skating rink. That's what it shows at a skating rink, so you know, not even 200 people were there in Carrollton, Georgia, and so he's reading that letter, and a real good friend of ours, Dusty Wolf, was doing Don't the Clown there. He was listening to the guy read the letter to Steve Lauder because he came in and wanted to read it. He handed it to Steve, he read it to him. And Dusty was in on, he was trying to lace his boots. He said that's as long as it took him to ever lace his boots because he couldn't look up, he was going to laugh. And so when he got through reading the letter, Steve looked at him and says, how many matches have you had? And he says, one if you let me wrestle today.
At least he was honest.
He was. Steve actually let him wrestle. And he got on the top rope because Dusty and Ken told him this is the way you do your finish. You get on top rope, you raise your hands, and you go, great Gooka Mooka, and you jump. Well, if you know you probably don't know, but that was a very, very old porn term. And so if you did, I mean, either you knew or you didn't know. He didn't know. So he jumped. He said it and he jumped. And everybody laughed.
I've heard a lot of stories, but I was going to ask you if Steve let him wrestle.
Yeah, because that was, he did, but he went out right after the guy read, and he went and got Ken. Ken wasn't wrestling. We were just there with Dusty, and he went and pulled Ken outside and talked to him. He says, I know you did it. I know it came from you. There's nobody else here that would have thought this through like that. So, yeah.
You know, I only got to work one show with Ken, and I didn't wrestle him, but I was on the show, and I've actually got it on the page. It was up in Anniston, Alabama at an auction barn.
Okay.
And he was out there as a heel, and I think, who was it, is coming out there spraying the perfume for him?
Was it Joseph?
It was probably Joseph.
Yeah, it was.
And that was actually the jacket that's behind that outfit.
Oh, wow.
I hadn't even had that airbrushed yet. It was just a pure white tux with tails jacket. And Sensational Sherry was my manager that night.
Yeah. Oh, I remember that night. Yeah.
And yeah, Ken caused a lot of hell. He had that crowd hot at him up there.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, because that Joseph was dressed in and very colorfully. Let's put it that way. And do you know what was in that spray?
What, water?
Mm. No, it was a mixture of menthol and eucalyptus and cheap men's cologne, watered down.
Oh, Lord.
And he sprayed the crowd coming up.
And I know actually Death Row was on that show too that night.
Yeah.
He was in the heel locker room because he wrestled either right before or right after Ken. So actually, I think that's probably the only times he was on the show with Ken.
Probably
I never was, I don't know, it's weird. I was never, the North Georgia thing, never could get anywhere up there.
Yeah, he didn't. When Sammy Kent took it over, Ken wasn't really in the North Georgia territory. It was some of the indies that ran around, so, people that run little spot shows. But he didn't work for Sammy Kent. They didn't see eye to eye.
Well, I know Sammy Kent, he brought out quite a few, like Bull Buchanan was up there with him in a few. I worked many years with him. But the farthest I ever got north was like Greenville.
Yeah.
Now I'd worked a show in LaGrange or two, but Greenville, and I was working up there against Mr. Donnie and Shadow, and I can't remember the other one. But I never really got up to the Atlanta area, and I missed a lot going up there.
Yeah. And you were talking about Greenville, Georgia, not Greenville, South Carolina.
Greenville, Georgia, yes.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
never made it that far north until I got into Columbus. So, but by then, half the people in North Georgia were coming to Columbus.
yeah. They go wherever somebody pay them
Exactly. And
something.
they paid good. They
Yeah,
paid good. And it was a bit, you were down there for one or two of the shows, I think, because you were bringing somebody some outfits.
yeah. And if I brought outfits, I also ran a gimmick table too. So um,
Well, that was one of the other things I was going to say. I know you've helped promote shows, you've set up chairs,
I
you've
set up
served the
rings.
outfits.
I broke down rings. I've carried my fair share of that heavy stuff.
What is one thing in the wrestling you've never done?
Well, I did write my name in the snow and I dotted the I and crossed the T. So I did do that too and have witnesses. Um, I don't know. I'm sure this stuff. I did not take a bump. If I do, it hurts, and I don't like to get back up. So you have to get a crane and lift me up. I never actually wrestled. I have managed, but I never wrestled.
Well, that was the other thing I was going to ask you. Have you ever tried to wrestle?
No, no, I didn't want to fall down. I don't like falling down and trying to get back up.
Did you
So
ever want to though?
no, because I didn't want to fall down.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I was going to ask if you managed because I figure you probably managed Ken a few times at some of these little shows.
yeah, a few times in some of the shows, I have other guys, not a whole lot because usually I have a gimmick table and that's where my money is. So, and I'm money driven like most women.
I understand that, and most wrestlers that have a gimmick table, that's what they are, is money driven.
Yep.
And just a little message to the people that have a gimmick table: don't be afraid to put anything on it. I made tons of money just from the stupidest things I could put on the table.
Well, I didn't put my kids on the table. You said the stupidest things, but I didn't put my kids on the table. So,
Some days you might have want to, huh?
um, you know what? I'd had to pay somebody to take my kids.
Well, I've met most of your kids, when they were old enough to talk, and I've never seen anything but respect come out of your children.
Yeah, they were taught respect. Ken was good with that, and he gave it and he demanded it and he got it in return. So because if you ever remember back, it was with him it was always sir or ma'am. It didn't matter the age of the person, and put the handle Mister or Miss on it. He had utmost respect for people, and he wanted the kids to be the same way because he said that's how you get somewhere. You can't be disrespectful to everybody and think that you'll get somewhere in this world. So
So
they
that's true. And that's the way he was. He never was disrespectful. Um, how many kids did you have when you were on the road, like in Mexico?
um I had five. I had one born in Mexico, so six total. I had
Okay.
five going in. I had one born in Mexico City, Mexico.
Which one was that?
That one is my trans daughter, Jackie.
Okay. Okay.
And
That's an
that
interesting thing to have on your resume.
she's very interesting. I do make all of her drag costumes. Um, and just on a little side note, people want to laugh. She's made $42 a minute. I didn't say an hour. I said a minute, and I knew I said a minute performing, and they didn't include tips. So before people laugh at them, they need to see what kind of money they make. And I say that
But
about wrestling or anything else. Because Ken lost a match against Jerry Blackwell and had to wear a dress, and people, make fun of him and stuff like that. Laugh all the way to the bank, honey, because that's what we did. You know?
exactly. Um, okay. Somebody was messaging me.
Yeah, tell him.
I tell them I ain't got time. Uh, no, I tell everybody they laugh my haircut, and I say, yeah, I cut the side off, and the Lord took that part. But they
Yeah.
all laugh at my haircut I had. I said, this haircut made me $250,000. Then they kind of shut up right there. But all right. Did we lose you?
I thought might. Yay!
All right, we're back and got everything going again. Um, when you went to Mexico, what was that like down there for you? Not the
It was a
wrestling, but just for you in Mexico.
it was a whole different world. That pretty little. We drove the first time down there. That was funny too. Not funny. Um, that story of go to Mexico, come to Mexico. We love you. No, we loved your money. We didn't love you, and not knowing, not being. We weren't smart at all. We drove our car down and paid a whole bunch of money to keep it and bring it back. But we never drove in but one time. But that was a interesting adventure. At that time, women didn't have the rights that men did, and I mean, it was set back 50 years back, even the way it was the U.S. in the 90s. The first time we went in was 1988, and he stayed through in and out because Mexico, the wrestling worked in seasons and not year round, and so it'd be so many weeks on and so many weeks off in different territories, different areas like Monterrey, and even going down to Guatemala and Costa Rica. And he worked down in there. They only worked seasons, so it was a few weeks there and a few weeks somewhere else, and then he would be sent back stateside to stay until they started back up again. I made a lot of outfits down there, and that's where I perfected the ability to make masks. Some of the wrestlers that made masks, because the men sewed down there, not the women. They taught me how to make the mask, and I would teach them how I worked with spandex, because they didn't work with spandex, and how I would make the outfits. I mean, we shared information. It was pretty interesting. I was pretty, for the most part, pretty well respected. Wrestlers would like to go, and they would try to beat, because they rode the bus. So you have ones trying to beat Ken back to the room so they could tell me what Ken did at the wrestling show. And they go, oh, Blondie. And then they would just go on about some story about what he did. And one of them had been sitting there. He left early to make sure he got back to tell me that, well, I don't need to talk to them. Well, they'll hang up in just a minute. And now you can't see me, can you?
Yeah, I can see you.
Oh, okay. I can see somebody's trying to call me. They don't need to talk to me. But he came rushing back to the room to get to tell me what had happened. And somebody had bothered to the wrestler, and I don't remember which one it was now, had angered Ken. We'll just put it that way. He made him angry, and he didn't listen. Ken was already having one of those days. He didn't really want to be there, and he got there and he left his underties at home and something else. And they'd been on the bus for 4 hours. He wasn't happy. And the guy didn't want to work. You want to work right? So Ken had his 6-inch punch. He used to box Golden Gloves. He had a 6-inch punch. And if you drew that right hand back 6 inches and came at you, it was damaging. And he broke the guy's orbital rim, sent him sliding underneath the ring, and he lifted the ring apron, told the guy, come back out and try this again. But he knocked the guy out so they didn't get to try it no more. But the guy couldn't wait to get back and say, oh, Blondie. And because they all called him Blondie down. He works Fabuloso Blondie, or the Fabulous Blonde. And so different ones would come. One time, Ken rode with Hector Guerrero. They went to a town, and Hector had his vehicle down there. And when they got back to the room, Hector comes in, sitting there talking. He says, I don't know what's wrong with Blondie. And Ken was livid. He said, I will never ride with you again the rest of my life. We're coming down that mountain at 90 to 100 miles an hour. He said, no guardrails. They didn't have guardrails. They just little 2-lane roads with goats in the way, cows in the way and stuff. And he just drove down the mountains like that, scared Ken. And Ken said, and Hector goes, well, you shouldn't be scared because God was with us. And so Ken goes, well, God told me to tell you to pull over and let both of us out, and we would just walk back because we won't ride with you again.